Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have not come down to this well to share my personal story, but today I feel so strongly about continuing the funding for V.I.N.E, which is the Victim Information Notification Everyday Services, that I would like to share my story at this time. My journey to hell and back began when I was 19 years old. I fell in love and married my high school sweetheart. Soon after we were married, he began drinking a lot, started becoming verbally abusive, emotionally abusive, and eventually physically abusive. I began to live in fear. I was distraught, ashamed, and felt alone. I knew I had to protect my son, who was just 2 years old at the time. It was a cold, rainy night in February, and I literally could not stop shaking. It was kind of like that feeling of, it was a nightmare that I was in that I couldn't get out of. I could hear him yelling at me, and I could see him throwing things, but all I could focus on was my son, who was crying in the other room. Racing through my mind was, what was I going to do? How was I going to protect him? And that just kept playing over and over in my head, knowing that if he even took a step toward that bedroom, that I would lay my life down for him. At that moment, I knew I had to escape. I didn't know how, but I knew I had to. I picked up the phone book after he had passed out after several hours of listening to his abuse and called the shelter for battered women. With a suitcase and a diaper bag in hand, they picked us up, and I never looked back. I share this story with you because if we would have had a system in place and a service like V.I.N.E, that would have been so helpful for me. If I would have had the tools that could have let me know whenever he was released from jail or I was being stalked, I wouldn't have been living in fear. Fear of not knowing if he was going to be at my front door, fear of not knowing if he was going to be outside the daycare where my son was, just plain fear. That's why I ask you today to please say yes to this amendment. There are hundreds of people who are in this situation. My story is not unique. I am just in a position where I can speak my truth and I can share this with you. It's important because victims of any kind of crime need to feel safe, need to feel protected from their perpetrator. V.I.N.E is a very important tool for victims and law enforcement. It helps the state meet its victims' needs and requirements that right now are under the law for them to have to notify them if their perpetrator is released. 48 states right now rely on V.I.N.E, and it's an extremely important service. We cannot let funding stand in the way of so many who rely on this important life-saving service. With that, I want to withdraw Amendment 6 in support of Amendment 7. Thank you.